Welcome to Keeping Up with Cannabis. Today we are at MyFloraDNA with Chad, and he's going to run us through what they do here and the relevance to cannabis. It's very interesting, we promise. It's something that's a bit new to us. I mean, we've delved into some of it, but this is way more in depth.
A lot of the stuff overhead.
Yeah. It gets pretty complex. So we got Chad here to run us through. We got some basic questions for us inexperienced people. And so let's get into it.
Dabbing it up, getting high as fuck.
Or a joint.
Or an edible. What? That's it.
Keeping up with cannabis.
And first off, welcome, Chad. Thank you very much for with us.
Thanks for having me, you guys. I appreciate it.
So what does MyFloraDNA actually do?
We are a genomics and pathology laboratory that is specific to testing cannabis for viruses, viroids, fungi, pathogens that wreak havoc on cannabis inventory in the industry. And then we also do what's called a molecular ID, which is a fingerprinting of cannabis strains and cultivars for breeders out there looking to register and classify those specific strains.
Gotcha. Okay, for getting the quick overview, we can definitely understand from a very basic perspective why that's very important and how that can be helpful, especially if you're trying to maintain quality control and obviously not put out horrible product that might hurt somebody or even kill somebody. I don't know how common that is, but I know actually doing research on this, I came across the issues with what we were talking about in the last video with the Canada company that had to do irradiation, and at first I thought that was like the most horrible thing I've ever heard, right? I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
but it's actually because they have true medical patients that was only for medical cannabis, and if some of those cannabis patients ingested cannabis that was tainted with some type of pathogen, that could be deadly to them. So they had to do that.
Yeah, and the thing is what I touched on, these companies do certain things because they have to put, they're not going to let a whole, crop go. They can't. It's
right.
It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Do you guys have any experience or knowledge with irradiation? I don't think it's that common here.
It's not something we do internally. I've heard of it before. I've heard of people utilizing it on products before, but it's not something we do internally.
Okay. Yeah, I've literally never heard of it in America.
Utilizing UV light and things of that nature to...
I don't actually know. There was some weird machine, and like depending on the research you do, some people are like it's totally harmless. All it does it slightly affects the terpenes, and then other studies are like no, it degrades this. So that's an interesting perspective. But actually, what you guys do, I feel like, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, if they were to have gone to somebody like you guys who did testing to figure out before they actually harvested any product to make sure there was none of these issues, they wouldn't actually have to irradiate. Because I believe irradiation is for pathogens and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an in-product scenario where they're, passing the product through to a customer base and going through the finalization of UV light or irradiation. But again, not something we particularly do. We are a pre-harvest scientific laboratory, if you will.
Right. So I guess what let me rephrase is if they were to have sent product to you guys first from their batches to make sure there was no issues, would that possibly have prevented them from having to irradiate it because there wasn't the issues?
There are, again...
Hold on. Let me interrupt real quick. Before we go crazy on that, let's give Chad a chance to explain to everybody like the difference, what you guys do here, what happens here, how do people get it, what's the process coming through here?
I think what Corey is describing is essentially a post-harvest chemical testing laboratory where they test for mycotoxins. It's actually, that's how I got started in the industry.
Okay.
Was working for a chemical laboratory, testing for potency, terpenes, residual solvents, heavy metals, mycotoxins, as an end game COA, certificate of authenticity, for cannabis products.
No, I was actually thinking more earlier in the line, like while they're growing. Do you guys deal with
well,
growers during that?
Yeah, but ours is more based towards plant inventory and not necessarily human consumption at that point. We're more concerned with the health of your plant inventory while growing it, because a lot of the diseases that we deal with, especially hop latent viroid, which is kind of the big one out in the industry lately, is literally known as dudding disease.
Okay.
And essentially what it does is hold back the plant's ability to produce cannabinoids and terpenes
Wow.
in the trichome,
Okay.
in the physical trichome, and essentially duds the plant out. So you're not maximizing yield, you're not maximizing potency, terpene base. The viroid is holding all of that back, per se.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
you said this is a popular one. Is it because you've seen it more and more cases throughout your different clients you work with, or is it just hearing it through other what would be colleagues?
Well, I mean, it's been around for quite some time. I mean, it was classified back in the 50s in hops. That's why in hop latent viroid. It's really
They're
recently.
bringing their viruses over here. How
Yeah,
dare- No,
well,
no, no.
I mean, the rumor has it, and don't quote me 100%, but there was a group of breeders out there trying to breed hops and cannabis together to see if they could get some genetic variations.
Oh, that's crazy.
You know, based on certain aspects of the hop plant. I believe they were kind of looking for drought tolerance genes or alleles, and so they bred it into the plant, not knowing that
That's insane.
Oh, that it
that hop
shared
latent
that
viroid
virus.
was essentially going to
Yeah,
be
no, yeah.
bred in right along with
Well,
it.
you don't-
That's
that's
the
your last-
stories I've heard anyway.
But like, without knowing the science behind it as a breeder or a farmer or someone who's just going, hey, this is a good idea. That's not their first process. Well, I don't want to do that because it could do this. And here comes some viruses. Or it could. You're just thinking, what if I put this together
course.
and it puts this awesome, strain or does something to my hops, which
Yes.
I don't know nothing about hops. I wouldn't know what it'd do. But
So
I mean,
it jumped over to cannabis, and over the last 10, 15 years, it's been bred constantly. It's over in Europe. It's been bred into,
Oh, wow.
into 5 or 10% of all seeds
wow.
out there. So in an industry where plant yield and potency is pretty much everything, this is probably the worst disease out there to date. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Because it literally holds both of those back upwards of 30, 40, 50%.
Wow.
Wow.
In
Okay.
yield,
That drops
and
yield and-
reduction in
That's huge.
Potency,
terpene,
right?
terpene and cannabinoid formation.
So where does MyFloraDNA? So are you guys like getting focused on the breeding part? Is
No, we don't do any breeding. We don't harbor genetics. We don't utilize customer genetics. Obviously, we are strictly a pathology lab utilizing genomics to help you identify some of these viruses and viroids and fungi that are out there trying to wreak havoc on one's plant inventory.
So when would a company reach out for service? Like at what point in their phase?
So, I mean, great question. Typically, when you are bringing plants in to start your grow, either through clone, third-party clones,
yes.
or you have a mother stock that you're going to clone from,
Gotcha.
you want to make sure that you test that mother stock for a HLVD at minimum, because when you clone from that mother, you will essentially pass that viroid right onto
Yeah.
your clones.
Gotcha.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
makes
I
a
didn't
lot
want
of
to stop your thought.
No, and so, yeah, you want to make sure that you are devoid of that viroid before
Right.
you start growing.
So now you say,
Very important.
if you find out that clone has that, is that just a throwaway clone, or is there ways to?
There are no ways
Okay,
to
so yeah,
mitigate
get
this.
rid of
you,
that.
You have
Really?
to cull and kill that plant out of your inventory. Now,
Wow.
if you have a specialized genetic, let's say it's the last few clones you have, and all of them have HLVD, you can take the process through meristem tissue culture, which is essentially bringing the plant down to its basic cellular level, putting it through heat and pressure over a period of 6 to 12 months. It's not a cheap option, but you can save that genetic and essentially repropagate it again.
Wow.
Gotcha.
It doesn't mean that one, it's going to be 100% HLV free, and two, it doesn't mean that it can't get it in the future from the exact same way it got it in the beginning, which
Yes,
is typically through human mechanical error.
Yeah,
where
really.
people are essentially cutting on clones, not having a clean environment where a bunch of pathogens can essentially propagate, where you have a bunch of plant material sitting around, and you have a dirty indoor grow or greenhouse. A lot of it harbors itself through those type of inconsistencies, if you will,
Yeah.
taking care of your inventory.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how self-evident that is for non-cannabis or non-growers, but that is hugely important if you're bringing in new genetics, trying to crossbreed, anything like
Especially
that.
with now that you're saying all these viruses and all these different, pathogens that you can catch while just creating clones.
Yeah,
That's right.
that makes sense.
Just creating the clones you said right now is what I took from that. It was
People
like,
can bring it in on their clothing. If you go visit another grow, even your home grow,
Right.
a
know,
lot of
that's-
these growers, these guys who work at these large grows have their own home grow.
Right.
That's
That's
crazy.
a good point.
There's this
They don't
cherry-
even know they have it, right? And they bring it right to their business grow. That's
Crazy
a great
you
point.
mentioned that with being on the close, this cherry processing plant out in Murata or past Murata, Linden, I believe. You walk through this air thing, and
Yeah.
it just blows your whole. You're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So yeah,
I've never been in a facility with one of those yet.
Conception Nursery,
But
with my
we've
buddy
seen-
who worked at the
Oh,
tissue
okay.
culture lab, that's what they had set up. But if there's anywhere that's incredibly important, it would be a tissue culture lab,
yep.
right? But yeah, so not only do you have to go through the air thing, but they had like sticky mats for your shoes, and then you had to fully suit up and put on booties. And I'm like, oh, this is excellent.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
great. And then they had like separate section doors with air. It was a very well done operation. But so yeah, that might be something we need to go in more depth for the importance of, if you're starting out or you're trying to expand your strains, that type of stuff, that could be incredibly disastrous. And so I guess that kind of harks back to the whole Canada thing. So they were brand new at the time. If they were bringing in a bunch of new stuff and they were to have it tested beforehand, went and did genomic testing and all that type of stuff, would that have been at least helped prevent those pathogen and whatever was the cause of the radiation down the line? If they would have done all this pre-stuff, would that, I'm sure it would have helped, right?
For certain.
Okay.
That's what again, you're going to put the same time, energy, resources, paying for nutrients, paying for labor, paying for your water, paying for your electricity,
Right.
To grow out an infected plant,
Right.
Than you would a non-infected plant. So
Yeah,
do yourself the favor and pay the $15 to $20, for the test,
yeah.
and make sure your inventory doesn't have it. Because the worst case scenario is you clone 1,000 or whatever, 1,000 clones from a mom.
Yeah.
And now you find out that, you backtrack and you go test the mom and you're like, oh man, this mom's infected. Well, now you've got 1,000 clones that you got to go take 5 or 10% of the inventory and test that. Right. So it just gets more expensive the longer you wait.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
That's actually because
Let alone losing the entire culling and killing,
Yeah.
throwing
Well,
away
you
the
said
entire
it's
inventory.
double.
It's
I
a
talked to someone
no-brainer.
once or twice a month who was literally losing their entire inventory over this thing.
yeah, because that's a no-brainer there where you
That
say,
is.
it's the cost, the upfront cost to
Is so worth
the
it.
money you can lose is, night and day. It's night and day because you figure 1,000 clones when they get matured and ready to harvest.
That's
You know.
how many pounds per? Well,
Yeah,
depending
well,
on-
I mean, depending on their crop, it's still, you put a price on that.
That's a lot.
It's gonna be way more than the starting.
The hop latent viroid, the latent nature of the viroid, you can't even see it when you're in vegetative state, right?
Oh,
Some people
God.
claim they can. They've had enough. Again, I'm not necessarily a cultivator, so a lot of cultivators have had experience with this viroid. They claim there's, the certain way an arm might stick out, how brittle a plant can be, are some of those physical characteristics. But you really don't know unless you test it.
Yeah.
Because it waits essentially until the plant starts, its enzymatic functions start kicking into high gear when it's going into flower mode, and that's when the RNA. The study has it. That's when the RNA essentially pulls from those enzymes to say, "Hey, I'm over here. Replict me," and the plant puts all of its energy into essentially replicting this viroid and doesn't put it into essentially growing. That's why they call it dudding disease. So you can look over an entire inventory and see these rolling hills of plants who have it and aren't growing versus the ones that are healthy.
Wow. And so even though you say these growers know how it looks, by the time they recognize that look, it's essentially too late, right?
For certain.
Yeah.
Oh,
because,
wow.
Nothing you do.
At
yeah,
a clone, you can't be like, this clone got it.
You
They
can't
all
go
look the
spray it
same.
and be like, oh, okay, I've sprayed and this is
Yeah.
going to mitigate the disaster. I mean, you're literally, you're going to take all the time, energy, and resources of what it took to get that clone to that stage,
Yeah.
and you're going to throw it away.
Wow.
So and you can put a dollar amount on that clone, so you might as well roll up all those dollar bills and throw them in the fire and burn
Exactly.
because
Yeah.
that's essentially what's happening.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can't believe that, the starting cost is so minimal to not do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's minimal from the standpoint of how many do you have to test, right? How many
still,
specimens do you have
because-
to test? Some people have, 2, 3, 4, 500 moms, right? And at $20 to $15 a test, that can add up for some people. And in an industry that's already, its margin is so thin.
True that. We're just talking about that.
People have a hard time,
Yeah.
throwing dollars into laboratory testing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we
Which
experienced that.
I get it, but other than that, if you don't do it, you're literally
worse off.
you're just crossing your fingers, hoping you get through this unscathed. And
Right.
I don't think that's really any way to run a business.
I don't either.
No.
That's
You know,
And-
like electricity, the guy who's running the real business needs to have a budget for this type of testing.
Yeah,
plain and
absolutely.
simple.
Yes. Do you see in the future facilities like having labs, testing labs, and labs integrated with them?
Of course,
in the future?
we are helping a couple of our larger clients integrate a system where they have on-site testing.
Okay.
So they don't have to essentially wait
Ship.
the 2 to 3 days, which is still not a lot of time, but they don't have to wait that time to essentially get a reading on their plants. If something tests positive and they feel they need to get rid of it, they can do it right then and there within more or less a 24-hour period.
Nice.
Wow.
That's
that is
fantastic to
really
hear.
good. Yeah.
That
That's
businesses are implementing and that they're
well,
proactive.
Yeah, and it helps out. It helps out their, the pipeline, And
And they're
you
setting
guys
a
are-
good standard for other companies.
Yes.
Like, look, if you're not doing this, we're absolutely gonna beat you on the final end, even if you can grow better looking. You don't know what's in there until the testing phase. So one of the issues we've been experiencing lately with products post Prop 64, so recreational regulations are now in place with the testing and all that. And with our experience with extraction and trying to, hone in craft quality and taste and all that type of stuff, and being a smaller extraction company, we dealt with a lot of crappy growers. So we dealt with a lot of subpar product, including mold, which we did with you a while back to do testing to see if you can extract and leave it behind or if it carries over and all that type of stuff. So we know what moldy product tastes like. We know what some other issues taste like. We're not necessarily sure what those issues were, but we knew we're like, okay, this isn't mold, but this doesn't taste right. This is not good product. So with that in mind, and with even harsher regulations and testing in place, why are we still experiencing those types of things with legit brands right now? Not gray market, legit licensed brands. Is there...
Okay, yeah, interesting question from a pathology point of view. I think at the end of the day, most of those problems come from the cultivation itself, nutrients you're putting into it. Again, I'm not a cultivator, but I think I kind of know enough to be dangerous a little bit. If you need someone to kill a cannabis plant, I am your man, right? But from a pathology perspective, let's say the grower has done everything right. He's been growing a specific cultivar he knows very well. The percentage is minimal on him, essentially. Deviating or messing up a harvest, right? From a pathology perspective, again, utilizing hop latent viroid as an example, you don't need, your plant doesn't need to be this complete dudded specimen for this viroid, I think, to wreak havoc on your inventory. And what I mean is, because I do get this question a lot from growers, like, can I outrun the viroid? We've now detected that this viroid is present, but my plants look great, right? They're robust. Colas look great. Everything seems to be on track, but we've tested with you guys, and it is showing that these plants are infected with HOV. Obviously, I think at that point, no matter what you do, you're going to move forward and cultivate that harvest, right? You're just too close to the end. There's no reason to really kill these plants off, because you're gonna get cannabis from them. You know, in a week.
The yield is not going to be as strong as you wanted.
Well, I mean, again, what I'm
or not yield. I'm sorry, you said not yield. I'm sorry,
potency, things of that nature.
Potency
So
that
that's what I'm
That's-
getting at. Even if the plant is showing that, based on the cultivator's outlook and what he's seen, everything looks great. It's no different. The viroid's no different than like a COVID. People have COVID, and they're not showing any outward signs. No change in behavior of how you're eating and sleeping, and no sickness, but you still got it. I think at the end of the day, the fact that you have COVID is still probably, from a health-wise, not good.
Yeah, sure.
You'd rather not have COVID than have COVID, right?
You still feel like,
even if you're feeling great,
Right.
Would you?
Yeah, you
would
still
you
don't
want
wanna-
COVID or
yeah,
not
yeah,
have
you don't
COVID?
want COVID.
Well, I don't see this viroid being any different. You might be like, I don't need a test. I grow through this viroid. Everything's fine. But I promise you, this viroid is affecting your inventory, even on its most minor level. So what I'm saying is, you're going to put all this time, energy, resources, paying labor, electricity, nutrient costs, all of this, and you're not going to pay for testing because you think you're the greatest grower in the world and you can outrun this thing. Fine, no problem. But at the end of the day, I promise you, that viroid, to some extent, is even if you can't tell, even if it's from a minor capacity, is pulling back on the proper growing functionality of that plant. Meaning, even if you take this your flower and test it, and it's at 25, 26, 27%, maybe something you're completely happy with, right?
Right.
Well, what if I told you that if you had tested that plant and you grew that genetic out from a 100% healthy standpoint, that potency level could be 29, 30,
Right.
31%.
Wow, yeah.
Does that make a difference to you as a cultivator?
It does. It does. Those numbers
It
are
should.
huge.
It should.
Yeah, it should.
In a
No,
world
you're
where
right, it
yield
should.
and potency rule, they absolutely should.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that viroid part of the regulation testing? Is that something they have to pass?
It is not. There is no state-mandated
Well,
regulation
because
or COA.
it's not affecting the end user.
It's not necessarily affecting
plant.
the end user. That's correct.
It's just
the
affecting the plant.
hop latent viroid is not going to be passed on to the consumer.
Interesting. Okay.
You know, it's
It's
essentially
just some-
256 nucleotide chain long, circular RNA, non-encapsulated. It can't live without its host.
Okay,
You know,
okay.
and again, it's plant specific.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so that's why they're like, now I see why a lot of growers towards the end are like, you know, well, you know, you can't do nothing about it. Let's just get this out there. Yeah, I'm not going to be happy with the yield now that I know that it has, I mean, yield, I always say yield, potency. And I'm not going to be happy with my potency, but let's still get it out there because we still need to get it out there.
Well, back to your original question, I mean, could that, not only is it pulling back on the potency, but it's going to be pulling back on the terpenes as well.
yeah.
So to your question, is that going to change the flavor profile, even if it's slight?
Right.
Is it going to change the flavor profile of the plant?
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Is it?
You know, you're not going to get the lemon cherry gelato taste that you would if you had grown that cultivar or specimen out being 100% healthy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And not infected.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes
because
sense.
we've actually had the same strains from 3 different growers and have had 3 different outcomes. You know, I'm not going to say that we were running at perfect condition, perfect, you know, we were perfect all the time, but they were far from different.
Yeah.
You know, they all had the underlining taste and flavor, but they were not all hitting the same.
Yeah.
you
Which
know.
we didn't, unfortunately, you know, a lot of growers won't divulge everything they do. So we couldn't be like, okay, this grower did this and this grower, okay, that's why this tastes a little bit better. We never, we know some, we could speculate,
There are
but I guess,
just so many factors going into that.
Right.
You know, time you harvested.
Oh, yeah.
Nutrients you put into it. You
Right.
know, all the hours under the lighting.
Exactly,
all
yeah,
of that.
so
that
many.
it affects the phenotypic behavior.
Expression.
Expression.
So do we have any idea whether that new viroid can affect taste so much that it would not just kind of tame the terp flavor, but literally ruin it and make
Sure.
it taste like not even like cannabis?
Sure.
And is that
Interesting.
and now,
It just depends on at what level it's affecting.
I was going to say,
Gotcha.
now is that like there's different levels of this
Of course.
thyroid that
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
it's like one,
you go into your
know,
inventory. There's a plant that's half the height of the same strain.
And you're like, what the-
it's infected. It's dudding out. Well, I mean, you call that 100% infected, right?
Yeah.
The viral load is extremely high.
Gotcha.
And then there's those plants that barely test on the spectrum. We call them an undetermined value. Where again, normally you'll want to wait a week or two and test that specimen again to see if it puts it over the viral load threshold as far as what they call CT value or delta RN values, which give you the value, the load, the viral load value of where the viroid's at in the plant.
okay.
Wow.
So there's that's like a spectrum. It can be high, it can be extremely low.
Gotcha. Okay.
What you're hoping for is it's not there, right? You want to.
Man, you guys are like a scientific lab here. No, right?
Well, I mean, our saying is no plant is truly tested until you've tested it 3 times over probably a 6-week period.
Gotcha.
To make sure that it's clean and healthy.
Wow, that's actually really good. It's
Yeah.
different stages of its
Yeah,
of its
replication cycle, yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty. That's
Yeah,
pretty
that
spot
puts
on
in
right there.
perspective what growers should be doing if they want
Of
good
course,
quality.
because some people will test with us once.
Right.
It'll have a viral load so low that we're claiming it's free right now, but they only do it
Right.
once, and then they call us 6 weeks later. Wait a minute, my plant, something's clearly going on with my plant. Well, how many times did you test it? Well, I tested it once 6 weeks ago. Probably should have tested it once or twice again over a period of that time just to make sure.
Gotcha.
This thing is a dastardly pathogen, man.
Wow.
You got to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's with it. for
And you
certain.
said the number one reason is these guys are so spread out on a budget that
It's tough.
it's tough. For
I
them.
get it.
Yep.
But if I could come up with, a $1 test
Right.
for the industry. I promise you, I would.
Right.
I mean, we want people to have healthy inventories.
Yeah,
healthy
and
businesses.
Yeah. So, like, if I clone, I clone my, okay, so I'm going to dumb it down here for everyone here. So I have a mother plant, right? And I'm going to clone this plant. So I get 15 clones off of it. Each of those clones I want to test, right? Every one, or just one of that batch
What
of
you
clones?
want to do is test your mother over a period of time as you're cloning.
Okay.
And understand which batch is part of which test. So if you test that mom 3 times and more or less it comes back negative, you've probably got a batch of clones that are going to be negative as well. Now here's the other problem with the viroid. It has what's called asymptomatic localization, meaning the way it moves around within the vascular system of the plant, it can go into one arm of the plant
no way.
and not another.
Oh, no way.
So you can go take so we use these sterile vials where you essentially take leaf clippings.
Yeah.
And what we tell people is to do top, middle, bottom to see if we can capture a wide swath of where this viroid might be. But there is a percentage that you actually might take clippings from every
And miss
arm
it.
of the plant that's clean and miss it in the one arm that's not. That's why
That's tough.
over a 6-week period, testing it 3 times, we're hoping to get this whole kind of round spectrum of the plant
Wow.
in hopes of catching it if it's there.
Oh, yes, yes. And but to me though, my point in asking those questions, I'm taking one mother plant, I'm doing, the testing on the mother plant. Say I get 50 clones off one mother plant, right? Those 50 clones, if I don't do no testing, those 50 clones are 15 times more testing that I'm gonna have to do later on than I did. So I'm think it's in the beginning the best thing to do is get these testing for your plants
And again,
before you stop.
You're never going to test those 50 clones.
No, you'll never ever-
99.9% of all people in this
I'm
industry
done. I'm
do
done.
not have the budget for that,
Yeah,
right?
so
So
taking
it's
care
not
of the
even going to go
mother-
that far.
Yeah.
Taking care of those mother plants at that stage and doing that, before and if in the perfect world, I'm saying, of course, I would say every time before you decide to start cloning a mother, you want to take it and get it
100%.
tested,
100%.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
What about
minimum.
for any companies that are getting their clones externally? Obviously, you would assume, okay, we only want it from a tested mother, but like the transportation,
Like getting it from the nurseries.
yeah, is that an issue?
So that's a kind of where the problem lies in the industry. I mean,
Okay.
as a lab, we've been around a little over 2 years now, and we deal with a lot of cultivators, guys who are essentially growing to flower, right?
Yeah.
And they're kind of chasing the dragon, if you will, because here they are, they've already got the clones, they've already got their moms, they're cloning from them, they're growing from them.
Yeah.
And they never bothered to start off understanding the pathology of that cultivar from the very beginning. Meaning, if you're going and buying these things at a nursery, do yourself a favor. Make sure the nursery is giving you some semblance of reassurance that the plant is disease-free. The nurseries should be, and we offer a certification process for the nurseries where if you do what we call our pathogen RX7, it's testing hop latent viroid, 4 viruses, Cannabis cryptic, alpha mosaic, P. curly, lettuce calorsis, and 2 fungi, Fusarium oxysporum and botrytis. If you pass muster on all
botrytis.
seven of those tests, we will give you a stamped certification that cultivar is essentially deemed clean by our laboratory standards. And and you can use that as a marketing tool to your clients to offer them that reassurance. I feel the call a couple times a month from cultivators who are coming to me, getting their inventory tested, so they can actually, because they're suspecting, either they're seeing the plants dudding out, whatever it is,
And they just-
and they suspect that they essentially were sold a 3-legged chair by these nurseries, so
Yeah,
they
of
want
course.
to take that test and go back to the nursery and say, listen, you and I need to work out either a refund or a new clones kind of thing. The biggest problem in all of this, because again, I'm not here to harsh on the nurseries. Obviously, they want to run a good business. They're trying to do the best job they can too. But somebody's got to take kind of the responsibility for making sure that these cultivars are going clean into the industry. Somebody's got to take that on. Somebody has to.
Well, they're the starting point. I mean, I think it does fall on them, unfortunately.
But the biggest problem is once you that clone leaves the nursery and goes to the cultivator, there in that gray area, there are things that can
was
happen.
My next question.
That aren't necessarily the nursery's fault. Again, if the cultivation has had this for a while, they haven't been testing, they don't know that this viroid's present in their, sitting on the walls or, sitting on dead leaves, in an unclean greenhouse.
Right.
That's not necessarily the nursery's responsibility.
Yeah,
that's your responsibility as a cultivator. So there's a tit for tat that goes on in this a little bit. But again, you can cut all that off at the knees by just starting and as a nursery saying, here, I'm giving you a clean stock. Now it's on you to make sure
Once
you
it
have
leaves here.
a clean growing environment.
That's because my question was going to be like, where is that where we hand off to you? Now that handoff, how trustworthy is that handoff? But like you said, if that nursery has a certificate and it's on there and like, it's certified, we're certified, this is good. From once it leaves certified, that should be.
That should
I mean, if I was a cultivator, I'd look at that certificate and see the last time the plant was tested.
Yep.
If it's gone beyond a certain time point, usually a matter of weeks.
Okay.
If the nursery's not going to test it again, it is your responsibility as the cultivator to get it into a lab.
Sure.
And at least test one or two before you go buy 5,000 of them. Go get a sample from the nursery to test and to make sure that on your end it is testing clean.
Yeah.
Before you purchase it.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly pertinent advice for anybody who's going that route, going outside to get your clones. I mean, Jesus, I feel like that's what happened to Aurora Cannabis is I think they got everything externally. One, they didn't really know what they were doing with the biggest operation in the world at the time. And then, they probably had cross-contamination. But circling back, how could we potentially go about figuring out whether what we're experiencing and tasting is that virus, or how can we determine what it actually is?
You have to do some sort of closed experiment where everyone's utilizing the exact same nutrients under the exact same light, in the exact same growing environment, and again have plants that aren't affected versus plants that are infected, growing them out to flower, and either doing a chemical analysis on them, a potency and terpene test, and then doing some sort of anecdotal flavor test with the consumer, and that's probably the only way you'd even remotely start to figure those things out.
So, this virus you said is just the plant. So, do you think it would even give the consumer a different flavor taste? Do you think it'd be noticeable?
You mean an extract?
It's a great question.
Or an extracts or smoking, like combustion with cannabis when you smoke it? Or
it's going to give you, like I said, it's going to give you a different flavor based on how it's holding back that terpene profile, that cannabinoid profile.
Okay.
That's what's going to change it.
Yes. Well, yes. It's not going to be as flavorful,
I don't think it's it's not the viroid itself that I think is changing the flavor. It's
no.
The
Just
viroid
what it does to the
changed
plant.
the
genetics,
It's changed the production, the trichome
the plants.
production. Yeah, if you look at this thing under an electron microscope, if you look at the trichome, typically trichomes look like a big palm tree or a lollipop, right?
Right.
It's on this stalk and this big, beautiful bulb of terpenes and oil.
Right.
That's when it's healthy. If you look at it with an HLV infected specimen, it looks like a deflated balloon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can see.
So, yes, definitely
You can
you're
see
gonna-
the physiology
yes.
of what this viroid is literally doing to the trichome structure and formation of the plant. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yes, then definitely it is doing something to those terps.
What
It's
about
not making them feel good.
What about if we ended up going back to a dispensary and inadvertently got another one of those products, and then before finishing it, could we then bring it somewhere to have it tested on some type of spectrum just to see if something comes up that could be, oh, that
Well, you
might
can
be
take
it?
flour and test it for HLV. It actually gives pretty robust readings
really?
at that point. Yeah, so you can test to see if the viroid's present.
Now, if a consumer, here's a question I have. If a consumer did that, right, and went to the store and go, oh my God, I'm going to bring this in, and it does, and then you have that testing that says it has not just this virus or any other stuff, do you think you could take that and be like, I want a refund because look at what I found in it? I mean, is that, because I know there's no refunds in dispensaries.
I mean,
know
it's
there's
a little bit of a loaded question,
That
right?
is.
I mean,
I was totally
the short answer,
Is it totally a joke?
personally believe, is yes. So if you go buy flour at a dispensary and you go test that flour for HLV and it shows positive, you're dealing with a non-disease free, something that's not disease free.
Right.
Well, I mean, if people
that
make-
again would have changed its flavor profile in the end, and so you're not getting what you paid for.
Right.
to some
enough
degree.
people complain.
That's my
enough
that's
things-
my personal opinion
Right.
in the matter. I know dispensaries might disagree with me,
Right.
but I mean that it's changing the flavor profile of that. of what
Totally,
you
totally.
purchased.
You're right. Loaded question. Totally, loaded question that was. But I want to give you guys. I want to in this little segment of our podcast here. I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about MyFloraDNA, what you do here, and
yeah.
and a little bit about you guys and what you.
I kind of have two roles because we are a startup. I'm director of business development, kind of in my first role, and then I'm director of client relations. So I not only deal with building out certain revenue aspects of the company, but I am the first point of contact for clients when they are going through onboarding with the lab, setting up accounts, trying to understand the testing methodology, how they go through the collection process. I help with all that as well.
Gotcha. And so one of the other things that was listed on the site was male plant detection,
Yeah,
which,
so what we call sex ID. Yeah.
right, okay. Yeah, we have some knowledge, but yeah, could you delve in more about
Well,
the
I mean,
importance?
basically, it's a process of extracting the DNA from the plant to understand if it's going to be male or female during its growth cycle. It's about anywhere from 95 to 97%
Accurate?
accurate. Thank you. But it does give the grower an indication of growing out feminized plants. You still got to watch them to see if they herm out in any way. Like, it doesn't guarantee that the plant is going to stay female. Obviously, there's environmental factors that could make it herm out and go male to some degree. But yeah, it gives you a good start on understanding the feminized nature of your inventory.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean,
Because if you're growing flower, obviously that's
you want
that's what you're
just-
looking for.
Yeah.
right, yeah, so
female plants.
growers are
Female
gonna
plants
know,
give good buds.
yeah, growers are going to know the importance of male detection, but for those non-growers, I mean, how much time could you potentially waste growing out male plants, and then aren't you potentially
Yeah.
also,
Of course, a lot.
and then
If
if
weeks.
okay,
know,
yeah, and then and you're taking up extra space, you're
You're
lighting them,
Yeah, you're paying people to
feeding
water them, feed them. There's a cost to that.
Yeah, that's another one that you're like the upfront cost. You're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But then the potential downside is you're like, oh, that's got to be worth it. You got to think that that's worth it. And
That's what I'm learning here. Like, don't get me wrong. We do know we have another relationship with you as us being in the extract business, and you were being our facilitator of getting our stuff tested. So we do know how it goes there. So we understand. But like, What was your question again? I just blurped right there.
Oh, just how much time would it save, or would you waste?
Yes, that's what
growing
we
out
know
the
the
male
cost of it. So we knew the upfront cost personally was tremendously saving us, because it's like, do we waste our time continuing with this, or do we waste our time? We just saved ourselves a whole bunch of time, cost, and headache with just one test. That's what we learned. And that's what we're learning here too, with when you're telling us about all these testings you do provide.
For certain.
You know?
I mean, again, that affects, these viruses and viroids affect extraction in the end game. I mean, you're going to have to process 1,000 pounds. Do you want to process 1,000 pounds with high cannabinoid and terpene content, or do you want to process 1,000 pounds with low cannabinoid and terpene content? You're going to put in the same amount of work. You're going to utilize the same amount of solvent, all the extraction time, the filtration time, all of that to get potentially 20, 30, 40% less oil
Yeah.
in that time frame. So
Yeah, that's huge.
it's
That is huge.
the same for extractors. Extractors don't bypass this pathology.
Right.
in
It concentrates
the end.
it. That, from what we've learned, is like with mold and
Oh
stuff,
well,
you get an even more
yeah,
concentrated
with residual
version.
solvents, and that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Right.
For certain. Whether you are one of the largest growers in the United States or you are a home grower, I mean, you can utilize our laboratory services to make sure that you're, utilizing all your resources to the fullest extent.
Right. So the importance of what we're talking about is really hitting home, because not only are we talking about how it reacts or how it interacts with extraction if you have tainted starting material, but think about pretty much every offshoot of cannabis products all originate around cannabis flower, right? So even edibles, all edibles, they have to deal with starting material. So everybody is it's going to be affected by whether that product is tainted or not. So it behooves the entire industry to really figure out how to make that part of every SOP for any type of grow, because whether it's flower you're consuming, then it's tainted, or whether it's edibles, it's still tainted, whether it's extracts, it's still tainted. Unless maybe you're doing the crazy, whatever CDL type of extraction, that new weird cleaning type that makes things taste weird,
yeah.
right?
Well,
So it's still
tainted is a loose term. I would use tainted from the standpoint of dealing with things that could transfer over in final product, like aspergillus. Again, residual solvents that were used.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is more of placing a dollar value on yield and potency. So you could think of every pound that you get versus every percentage point in potency.
Right.
There's a dollar value attached to that, and ultimately, if it's affecting the business, it's going to affect the consumer. So, I mean, as a business, you want to maximize your yield in that time spent based on the resources and energy that was put into it.
Yeah.
And so you want to maximize that.
Yeah.
And if you have a pathogen out there that literally pulls back on that maximizing capability,
Right.
you want to make sure you're steering clear of that.
Yeah.
Not only for your sake as a business, because if you're constantly growing at a 30% less threshold because of a viroid that's affecting your grow, that's going to add up on how it gets to the consumer. You're probably not going to be in business very long, but you want to put a dollar value on maximizing the full potential of that inventory.
That makes sense.
And so now, like, what I get, the whole picture I get is, like, you're the cultivator's backup. Like, you're their right hand.
Right hand,
I
yeah.
think the relationship with you
Well,
and
we're a
cultivator,
quality assurance.
Yeah,
for
you're
them.
like that. You guys got my back. I know, because from what I see is, you're just looking out for the plant. So that's the best. We're both doing the same thing. Basically is what you're telling me. You're
Correct.
The cultivator's looking out for the best that its plant can give back, and you're looking out for that plant's best way of being healthy let's keep it that healthy and everything.
Of course,
So it's-
he's doing it on a micro level. We're doing it, he's doing it on a macro level. We're doing it on a micro level.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's amazing. Because like, of course, a lot of the stuff goes over my head because it's real, it's changed a lot from what we used to do, and it's a different type of testing. It's different ballpark now. So, and it's so great to hear this and learn this and discover all this, because it's now we have someone looking out for what at least I got into the industry for back in the day, for the love of the plant. Everybody talked shit on this plant. Everybody was, this is not what it is. Then we're like, oh, you know what? Now we can make this plant make us money, but we got to give this plant a lot of love back. And that's what I love that you guys do. You look out for these plants and give these plants the love they need,
For sure,
so they can give us what you just said, that the industry puts a dollar sign on it, but you give it that love, so it does give back the fullest potential that the plant wants to give.
We are,
because that's what the plant's here for. The
100%.
plant's here for giving out what it gives out, and by you guys helping that stay as healthy, I think that's awesome. Where you guys,
Yeah, MyFlora, we are a scientific tool in a cultivator's arsenal that allows him to maximize his potential. How many cultivators, probably over the last 10 years, this viroid has been around, have looked at a dudding plant and think it's their fault. I'm overwatering. Oh, I didn't give it the right amount of nutrients. Oh my gosh, I'm doing this wrong. And they're doing nothing wrong. It's a pathogen that they more or less just can't control. But until you test for it and realize that, there, again, you're more time, energy, resources being wasted because you're scrambling trying to mitigate something that is beyond the mitigation process, or the way you know it as a cultivator anyway.
So did you say right now? You said this virus has been around for 10 years.
Well, it's been around. I mean, listen, it's RNA. This thing has probably been around since the late heavy bombardment period 3 billion years ago on this planet.
Yeah,
right?
man,
It is the most basic
I'm
form
just saying,
of life.
I'm just saying though, the virus in the cannabis plants, because it was just now I don't want to say discovered,
Crossbred with hogs.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know, upwards of 10, 15 years ago, this thing wasn't necessarily playing into the plant's physiology or pathology. I can't confirm that 100%, but it's just over the testing that we've done, genomics laboratories have done with cannabis over the last 10 plus years.
Identified it. That's the word
they've identified it.
See, look at that. See, should have fucking dabbed more. I would have been getting words faster, dude. But no, you identified it now, knowing that is the virus.
Yes.
So
now you have the information.
you have the information. So, oh wow, that is insane. Because you'd walk through like a sea of green and then see 1 or 2 or 3 plants. You're like, what happened there? And it was funny because we'd ask growers and we'd be like, what happened there? And they'd be like, I think
the light
went out. I mean, my
Exactly.
light, or I think, man, that one. Oh, you know what? I gotta check the watering on that. I think the
that
hose
does
got
put things in a
kinked up.
fascinating-
They would just
Yeah,
call
that's
it. They would
crazy.
call it a dud, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this genetic's a
Bad
dud.
clone,
Yeah, this one doesn't. My buddy told me
Whatever's
about it,
going
too.
on with it, it's just a dud.
That's insane.
So yeah, for all you growers out there or starting wanting to grow, anything like that, that's something you really need to keep in mind, right? Is, how much is it worth testing, especially if you're starting out with new clones, new mother? I think it's really worth it, especially for exactly what we're just talking about, to go through an entire thing and be like, oh, I did something wrong, fix that, but then it just changes something else and still another deficiency. So when you first start, try and start with the cleanest slate possible. And I mean, the best way to do that is to get them tested as thoroughly as possible, in my opinion. That would be what I kind of gleaned from this. So one of the things MyFloraDNA does is cultivar verification. Can you go a little bit more in depth about what that means?
So we call it molecular ID. Basically, we utilize a 3,000 point SMP, single nucleotide polymorphism marker system, to essentially create a mosaic map of the genetic structure of that plant. So you can use it in one of 2 ways. If, let's say, you are a tissue culture company and you have mixed up a tray of clones and you don't know which is which, as long as you have a control clone that you want to verify the tray of clones against, we can essentially tell you which clone is matching for that tray, which clone should be there, which clone is not, right? So we can identify that for essentially an inventory mismatch. The second is for breeders who essentially are growing, phenohunting, growing specific strains, and they want to essentially, they think they have something special on their hands, and they want to essentially fingerprint it and essentially put their name stamp. We utilize a number system that you can upload to the blockchain to essentially say that this genetic mosaic of this cultivar that I bred is mine, and it's stamped that way. And so if anybody were to try and take that cultivar and replicate it, grow it without your permission, as long as you have the plant tissue to verify against, we can tell you if that cultivar is indeed yours or not. Even if they cross it, we can essentially reverse engineer the genetics back to the original plant and tell you if it was yours. We don't get involved in any legalities of any of that. That is completely up to you. But from a scientific standpoint, we can do some of those things.
That's fascinating. Awesome. I mean, that is a weird issue, or at least was when we were doing our stuff. That was a weird issue in the industry. Was kind of strain ownership, or who bred this? Who was the originator of this? What's the real strain? And what are all the offshoots from that? I mean, just like any OG Kushes. Like, how many OG Kushes are there?
I think in the near future, you will find this sort of genetic fingerprinting, molecular ID, become probably a standard in the industry.
Yeah.
When you sell clones out into the market, you can verify that it is the cultivar that you're getting, things of that nature.
But you know what's funny is like every industry, it takes a while before this gets invented, right? And then by the time it's invented, the people that are now doing it take that credit, not the original strain guys.
I'm 50 years old. I remember a time when it didn't matter what it was, as long as you got high from it. It was a good thing, right?
And that brings me.
It's gotten so much more specific over time.
That actually reminded me of when I had my brain farts back a little bit ago. Where I was going to is, if I almost feel like sometime at the very end, they know the customer or people that are smoking, like, you're still going to get high from the product. Whether it's 22%, 29%, you're still going to get lit from the product. I mean, if you had a full long day, imagine you had a full long day, right? Haven't smoked all freaking day. Day was kind of shit, not the best. Stopped by a dispensary, had to wait extra long, so now you're more kind of pissed because dispensaries suck. No, I'm joking. They do.
They do.
But then you get that joint, right? And you fucking light up or dab up, whatever, right? And then you're chilling, right? And then you're like, oh, you found the package of last time when you went there, right? And you're like, oh, this, say you got an eighth last time. And you're like, man, this is 29. And then you grab this one, you're like, this says 20%. Fuck, I feel hella high as fuck.
Yeah. Well, again, that's why you got to start checking out its terpene base and how that's playing into it. Like, one of my favorite strains is a Mr. Nice. Usually tests at 13, 14, 15%. I love it all day long.
Right.
Again, this 30% stuff, I guess it's good for the young folks out there, but I stay away from it. It's too much. It's too much.
Question I have: you can answer publicly or not, but do you prefer smoking cannabis flower, edibles, dabbing? What's your preferred method?
I am a concentrate guy.
Concentrate only guy.
Again, I was an extractor for many moons. And so I like the way concentrates metabolize in my system. You can kind of blow your brains out, but 20 minutes later you can go give a speech in front of 1,000 people, right?
Yeah.
Cannabis flower, as much as it was the beginning of my recreational use, I love it. Obviously, people pass a joint around. I promise you, I will take a hit of it. But I just kind of like the clean feeling of extracts. Some of that plant material, combusting that plant material from flower, kind of leaves a fog in my head that lasts hours sometimes, right? And when I started extracting and came upon concentrates myself, it was a whole new world for me. Plus the ease of use of a vape pen or something, and it's kind of being inconspicuous in a lot of ways. I like that as well. I've got 3 kids, so I've got to keep it on the level.
And it doesn't take away because it's just a quick dab.
Exactly.
You blow your brains out, like you said.
Yeah.
I like that. I like how he used that now. It was so great. And then you get back at it.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, can I ask you, what do you use? Do you prefer vaping? Do you have a rig?
So I honestly I got into concentrates probably 10 years ago. I was probably one of the first big dabbers in the area. One, because I worked for an analytical lab, and there was no real disposal at the time, and so all of us that worked at the lab got to take these concentrates home. I had a glass rig, I had an e-nail, and so I used to use a rig for many years.
Do you still use a rig? Or?
I've again, having 3 kids now, I've kind of shied away from it. I like the ease of use and kind of the controllability of a vapor. Of a vape pen.
Now, see that's great because now we got what you like, what it is, and me and Corey, as you know, we're big dabbers, and we kind of the
exact same thing.
Same thing. So we like that.
That's funny. Yeah.
That's awesome, dude. And I do like hearing I love knowing what people's preferred method of smoking is.
Yeah,
you know?
I wish there
Getting
was
high.
more low dose options as well. As I notice as I get older, I have so many friends that have quit because of the paranoid thing, right? And obviously high THC can really bring that on. And I've found as I get older, I have a little bit more experience with that.
Yeah.
But what I've noticed is if I can figure out how to keep my dosage low, I can be kind of just as high or have that relaxing experience physically, but I'm just not so on edge, if you will, from the high THC. So I'd like to see more low dose products out there.
I'm in agreement with you. I tell this to Corey a lot that I feel like concentrates now sauce is great and stuff and everything, but I feel the way it's done now, it's just I feel like there's a little too much over concentrated.
This whole race for the 30% threshold is
so
just
my thing was
beyond me.
Well,
It's
my
just
thing back in the
crazy.
day, we used to hit our extracts. We used to hit from 70 to 82 all the time. We would always hit, but that's because we were making back then where it was just shatter. Remember shatter?
Oh yeah. I was talking flower, but yeah, when you're talking a 92% distillate,
I'm
right?
talking about
It's
our
like
product,
who needs that?
So when we were doing that, I found that at that percentage of terpenes, it gives you a great flavor profile. Like we had different strains that really hit the mark and really tasted amazing. And you can tell from the different strains. Now, when I feel like I get conscious, I still get the taste, but I feel like the terps are a little too stingy. Like it's like over, like the sting, I mean,
I disagree. Yeah.
Like, I feel like the limonene is like in all of them,
Right.
sometimes. And it's like, it's just overbearing because it's too much. He's
Sure.
like, no, I need it more. I need
More
it more.
terps, the better.
Yeah.
Well, we're all different
We are.
physiologically
Right.
from that standpoint, right?
But we all dab. You see that, ladies and gentlemen? We all came together with dab.
interesting.
See, and my thing too, another point that you were hitting on is the way how, extracting, you found out the dabbing was your thing. I used to love opening up a fresh bag of weed. My friends came over and just smell that.
Of course.
And you're like, dude, this smells amazing. I want to live in here. Then we'd roll a joint, right? And we hit it. And like after the third hit, you You pass it your buddy, he hits it, and then you get it back. You're like, the taste is not there no more. It's burnt flour. It's just burnt, you know. So now you don't have that terpene flavor no more. But you're like, man, those green hits are the best. I remember it was all
100%.
about green hit. And then I remember when you would share a bowl, you would pack a bowl, and then you were an asshole if you lit the whole entire bowl.
Right. You got to corner it, right?
Yeah, you got to corner it because you want everybody to share that
Totally.
green hit.
100%.
And then it was the day we fucking just started dabbing. Real dabs. I'm not talking black oil. Remember black oil? You're just fucking, I'm just high, but you're like, oh. Anyways, we're dabbing, and then all of a sudden you finally dab that dab that's, you know, where we're at now, and you finally dab that dab, and you're like, that tastes like the fucking bag. That tastes like what I just smelled.
Without the
burnt,
the plant smell.
Yeah.
Right, so it's just pure terps.
Pure terps. And I was like,
that was the greatest thing ever. Yeah.
Listen, although I don't purchase flour, right? I in the industry,
Yeah.
I have people who will give me bags
course,
every
right,
now and then, and I'll just roll joints and just suck on them kind of thing, right? Like without lighting them, right?
Yeah.
You know, just for 15, 20
the
minutes
taste,
before you light it, like you just draw it in and you draw those acids in kind of thing,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the non-decarboxylated stuff,
Yeah,
right?
you're
It's just
right.
the real taste of the plant.
You're
And
totally right.
That's what I love. And I'm with you. Like I love concentrate, but man, when you open up a Ziploc bag of awesome stuff, there is nothing that compares to that. I love that. Nothing.
Yeah.
It's all aroma, right?
Yeah,
It's all based on aroma.
yeah, and then, but that's what my thing is. Nothing compares to that. But dabs came the closest for me to be like, oh my god, I got that flavor when I dabbed, you know.
Yeah, like the
I got
live resins,
that
and things
aroma
like that.
flavor when
that's
I
what
dabbed.
prefer.
I was like, wow, you know, that was the closest. So I was like, I'm sticking with this. Why do I want to smoke flower? Why
Yeah.
do I want to, you know? I just like you. If a joint came around, I'm not gonna be like, oh my god, no. I'm gonna be like,
I do.
old buddy here.
Right, exactly.
But, that's funny that you said that you don't go out of your way to buy flour and stuff like
Not
that. You know,
typically,
but you
no.
get it. And same here. Flour ends up coming to our lap. Our last episode we did a review, and I had bought the joints, they're mini joints for the review, but I bought them knowing that I was giving my neighbor a gift, and he likes them. And that was the thing is, I was able to just, here you go. I used it for us, and here you go. Because it wasn't, they would go to waste. They would stay there and probably sit there for a while before I'm like, okay, I'm going to smoke one of these.
Right.
You know, so yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, all dab.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So one last question before we let you go, because we've taken up a lot of your time already, is what do you see in cannabis's future? What do you see possibly happening, developing, and then how do you see Flora fitting in to that?
Well, I mean, I think from the standpoint of pathology and genomics in cannabis, one of the things they're talking about is hop latent viroid jumping over to wine grapes.
Oh, God.
And so now you have a whole new pathology problem in the state of California on your hands. And so I foresee a future where, the Department of Agriculture is going to wrap their arms around this and like a chemical COA at the end to make sure you're free of residual solvents, heavy metals, things of that nature for the consumer. They're going to take more of a kind of a business to business approach where they're going to mandate that if you want to grow cannabis in the state of California, your plants have to be tested to some degree to be pathology free. So it's not out in the environment, it's not spreading, it's not jumping over to different agricultural products. So I see that developing. I see the genomics and pathology pre-harvest probably developing further from a regulatory standpoint. I think if we're going to take this seriously to some degree, because I mean, it's the way it is with growing tomatoes, avocados. I mean, those standards are in place for those very reasons.
Yeah.
I think cannabis is going to develop along those lines as well. So I see us growing from that degree as a laboratory.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think it's important.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if I was a grower or in the growing sphere, I would, if you're not already doing that, I would get ahead of the ball and just start working that into your SOP. I mean, like for us, when we were in the gray area of extraction, there was no testing requirements. The dispensaries didn't have any testing requirements. They weren't on us. They weren't
right.
they weren't on anybody. But we took it upon ourselves because we knew, without a doubt, that once this goes rec or legal or in any way, that testing is going to be a requirement. So let's get ahead of it, show that we're already doing that, and we know what happens and what we need to do if something goes wrong. So I would definitely encourage any growers that I think that's not remotely out of the question that that's going to be a requirement. And I think that's helpful for everybody.
Even if you like,
I'm not here to tack on more expenses
No,
for
but
everybody.
That's what we talk
That's
about.
not my goal in any way, shape, or form.
No, but
I'm
even
not
when he
advocating
was
for
mentioned-
that in any way. I just think it's
Right.
the lay of the land. I just think that's what's going on.
But even him mentioning that, 50% of it was we wanted to know what our potency was, what was in our product. That was 50%.
Well, let alone
But
if you
the
were
other
passing
50%,
pesticides onto people. People
well-
who are immunocompromised.
Yeah.
Right.
You
But
know,
the
you don't
other
want them smoking aspergillus. You don't want them putting
no.
myclobutanol in their, into the system. You don't want
Right.
those things.
No.
Exactly.
And the
Yeah.
other 50% was marketing because I asked, my way of getting into dispensaries back then was, are any of these tested?
Yeah,
and they were
there were
like,
very few.
no, not really. And then I go, well,
Ours is clean.
I'm from, and I would tell them who we were, and I would say, here's ours, and I would actually bring a test certificate from your guys' analytics, and I would show them, and they were like, hey, boss, this guy's like professional, got the test.
Yeah,
And
right. It went a long
right
way.
in I went.
From
you
making,
know,
to
and
making
it-
yourself a legitimate business.
Yeah, and it was all from, and still like, at a marketing standpoint, you could put on your packaging all, certified, and you could put all those things on packaging because right now we were talking on our episode, everything's sold through packaging. You sell shit through all this packaging now, everything, and I feel like that would be a good thing to put on packaging. What you were saying, certificates of authenticity.
Yeah, the molecular ID, right? Certifying that this is the cultivar you're buying, right?
Yeah.
Especially with this whole name game
Oh,
that
that would
goes
be so
on,
beautiful.
that changes month to month just because one guy's crossbred it with something else and he wants to put his own brand. I'm all for the pheno hunters and you guys expanding upon the genetics, but at some point, I mean, you're going to have to molecular ID this in comparison to the genetics that are out there to make sure that the consumer is buying what they think they're
Exactly.
You want to
buying.
copyright that shit, bitch. Trademark
Exactly.
For various reasons, but yeah, just a health standpoint is incredibly important. This is a field that the entire industry needs to be much more aware of the importance. I know it kind of maybe sounds like we're all of a sudden we're a shill, but we came in here ignorant, just doing, going to the website, okay, this is what they're doing. We're not going to go into more in depth on our own. We're going to allow them to explain it and take in that information and make opinions. And, from consumers, we are not a business anymore. We're just consumers. And then still having this issue of horrible, literally unconsumable products, like stuff I've had to throw away, $40 product I've had to throw away. That to me shouldn't be acceptable and shouldn't be incumbent upon us to take the financial and potentially health hit on that. I don't, that's kind of the whole thing. I was like, how can we figure out what it is? Because I don't know if it's, I guess maybe best case scenario is it's the virus and that it's just altering the terps and it's not anything actually unhealthy. But the way it tastes, I'm like, this doesn't seem right at all. This can't be
Well, are you
good.
getting what you pay for?
Definitely not.
Exactly.
Definitely not. This tastes nothing like cannabis. So yeah, the
No,
importance.
but that's the
From a
bottom
consumer
line
perspective,
is, are you getting what you paid for?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not.
Not being like, did you get what you paid? It's the bottom line is, are you getting what you paid for?
Right.
And with that being said, we are glad to have you on our show.
Thank you, you guys.
We're glad to
It was
do
great.
this.
It was good to be here.
We learned a
know-
lot.
We love getting these messages out for certain.
Yeah,
This
oh,
is
so
awesome.
important.
We hope to do many more with you. Anything new, please call us, let us know, invite us back over.
Or if you guys have any questions, any follow-up questions, because I mean, out of all the pathogens and whatnot, we basically only talked about one. I mean, you guys do a lot of other stuff besides the one virus. So if you guys have more questions, more in depth,
Viroid.
virus. Yes, excuse me. If you want more info, if you think we need a part 2, let us know. Let us know how we can educate more on this, because I mean, we don't know everything. Definitely not. I mean, we just got the cursory info, and it's fascinating and obviously incredibly important to the entire industry. And so I think this is very fascinating. And thanks again. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
See you guys next time. So we'll probably use none of this because you didn't answer none of the questions I wanted you to really answer them like. So you kind of ruined it for us.
Oh, do we need to?
Yeah, I didn't know the lights were gonna go off like that. Do you do like a clap on